Welcome to my video review of the Cubot S550. It's a large screen Android phone. We have a micro USB charging lead provided. There is a tempered glass screen protector. You also get the wipes just below that here. To attach that, we have a case, a plastic case which slots onto the back. You'll see openings for the speaker, and there's a hole here for the fingerprint scanner. A basic quick start guide, a 3-pin UK plug, 1 amp power adapter, and there's a small tool here for opening the memory and SIM tray slot. Moving in a bit closer to take a look at the phone, the sides have a metal bezel on. It feels like quite a nice phone. It's quite a solid build. On the back here we have a fingerprint scanner. We'll have a look at that shortly. There's a 13 megapixel rear camera and LED flash there. At the bottom there is a single speaker opening. This is the micro USB charging port. There's a plastic surround on that. It makes it a bit easier to insert and remove the plug. Side controls, standard, volume and power. Just inserting the tool now to remove the tray. You'll note with this tray you can use a micro and nano SIM card, but if you are using a micro SD card you will lose the use of one of the SIM slots. So you have dual SIM support, but only if you're not using a memory card. Just pop that back in. It's quite a secure fit, doesn't come out on its own. And at the top we have a 3.5mm headphone jack. Handset is running a reasonably up-to-date operating system. It's Android 5.1. You'll see the usual menu settings here. You have a few additional settings too, including this one. This allows you to use gestures, and it gives you an explanation of how they work. Perhaps the most interesting feature is the fingerprint scanner. So you go into the settings and then select the finger that you want. Enroll the finger simply by tapping up and down on the back of the scanner, and you'll see the progress on the screen. It works quite well. It's fairly quick to do. I found it one of the better fingerprint scanners. So it only literally takes maybe about 10 seconds to enroll a finger for that. I'm just testing it now to see how it performs, and I found most of the time the fingerprint scanner worked perfectly. Important to note that you should just enroll it how you would normally touch and pick up the phone, because it's reading a specific part of the finger, not the entire finger. I also tested at different angles, and again most of the time the phone picked up the fingerprint. Now there were a few times that it didn't, but the second press it usually did. So I'm quite impressed with that particular feature. That's one of the better implementations of the fingerprint scanner that I've seen on a phone. Moving quickly on to the benchmarks. This is Geekbench 3, gives you an idea of the processor. That's 1811, which is quite good. This is a quad-core processor, so it's pretty much in line with what you would expect. Running Antutu, this gives you an idea of the overall performance for 3D gaming as well. We have a score of 31,603. That's actually quite a bit better than the Cubot X15. The reason for that is probably the 720p display and the increase in clock speed on the graphics processor. There's some additional information here about the phone. The only additional thing to note here is the sensors. There isn't a huge number of sensors, just a basic MediaTek one. Running through the sensors now. Whether that's a problem, I suspect not. There's no gravity, there's no gyroscope. There's just the MTK gyroscope, and there is a light sensor. Moving through some of the camera settings now, fairly standard for the MediaTek phone, up to 13 megapixel and for the video you also have time-lapse interval shooting as well. I noticed the charging speeds are a bit slower than some phones. It's about 0.65 to 0.9 amps depending on whether the phone's switched on or off, so that's an area for improvement there. Looking at a few test shots I've taken here, these are in low light inside. Just zooming in, you can see there is a bit of noise reduction on some of the images, which is pretty much expected for a phone. One area I did note when taking pictures was sometimes the images would be blurry. When I went into the information and had a look in at that, I found that if I wasn't using the LED flash, it would be picking a somewhat slower shutter speed than I would expect, so just watch out for that. Even with the stabilization on, try and hold the phone steady or try and use the LED flash if you can. Quick summary for me on the stronger and weaker points of the S550. I liked the build quality. It certainly feels better than the price might indicate. It's a very solid feeling handset and good finishing. The fingerprint scanner worked quite well. I was pleased with that. 3D performance was better than expected and also better than the X15. Battery life is 3000 milliamps an hour, so I was easily getting a day out of the handset and possibly 2 days if you're a lighter user, so there's no complaints on that side. Negative points would be slower charging speeds, the lack of notification light. That's something simple but which would be quite useful to have. The touch capacitive buttons are also, they're not backlit either. They're fairly well visible. It's quite a reflective material on there. You can see them in lower light, but it would be handy if they were backlit. Certainly worth looking at if you're into the budget gaming. This is quite affordable and it does a pretty good job on 3D performance.